I would say it's passionate, it's real passion.
We have to beat the Roosters. That's just the way it is.
You know, it was instilled in us that we didn't like each other.
They literally hate each other and they want to get one up early.
It's hard to get your head around a rivalry that goes back so far in rugby league.
Roosters, South. Roosters, South. Go to bunnies!
The Foundation Feud. Aussie rivalries don't get any bigger than this. The South Sydney Rabbitohs and the Sydney Roosters. They first played each other back in 1908. They then contested the first ever New South Wales Rugby League Grand Final. 243 matches, 35 premierships between them, and 111 years of history. Two clubs who refuse to take a backward step.
It was everything I dreamed of to play for South Sydney, and there was no prouder moment when I wore the red and green jumper.
So those mufti days where you have to dress as your favourite character or something like that, I would always wear my Souths outfit with my footy boots to school. So it was always, I always held Souths on a pedestal growing up, and always knew what kind of an honour it would be if I just played even one first grade game for Souths.
The legend goes, and if you read the books, and the players used to go the streets of Redfern with the live rabbits, rabbitoh, rabbitoh, and selling the rabbits. The colours red and green, the cardinal myrtle come from the flower, I believe, and there's various stories, but it's, yeah, so basically it's the rabbitoh cry and the cardinal myrtle, and the colours just stuck with the club.
What does the club mean to you?
Oh, so much, mate. I love them. I've been going for them since I was 4 years of age. I'm 44 now, 40 years.
Well, you know, I've spent my whole career here and, you know, come through the grades years and, you know, my family, and love the club, and, you know, just to come in every day and, you know, train here and, you know, get to play on the weekend, it's just been great.
For supporters of the club, the Rabbitohs are more than just a sporting team. The club is the most successful in Australian rugby league history. It really is a way of life, and the team represents what it means to grow up in the Redfern area.
You know, them big flats in the Housing Commission. I come from the Housing Commission in Redfern, and you know, just when we won as a kid, we were kings for the week. You know, like that's what all we had really. We didn't have much, and we just had our football team, and when they won, and we carried that on when I was there, because I know what it meant to the people of the area, and you know, just when you win, the people who haven't got much, they had their footy team, and they're on top of the world.
Then you've got their neighbours, the Eastern Suburbs District Rugby League Football Club, the Roosters. They represent a different type of growing up in Sydney, but culturally they've got just as much history.
My father played for the Roosters back in the 60s, so I always had a connection with the club, and you know, growing up in North Bondi was pretty hard not to have a connection with the club, and yeah, just really fortunate that things worked out the way it did, and got an opportunity to play in the President's Cup team and then go on to play first grade.
Luke Ricketson has Easts in his blood. One of the few local juniors who came up through the club, he became the first Rooster to play 300 games and won a premiership in 2002.
You know, we used to hang our hat in the 1975 Grand Final team, and you know, I used to go to functions and look at videos of, you know, Arthur Beetson, Ronnie Coote and Fairfax would be in our face every day, and that was, you know, the things that we aspired to do, and it was such a dry spell when I came to the club. We just weren't really competing in the top level, but it was just good to be part of the Roosters.
I always looked at it from the point of view that if you're living in the eastern suburbs, South Sydney area, you're actually lucky because you've got two teams to choose from.
Because we share the same area too, Mike, like their area is Bondi down at Bronte, and they're claiming the Coogee is their area, but Southern Courier did a survey and they deemed the Arden Street as Rabbitoh territory. So there's been a bit of a dispute over the borders.
I think we're pretty proud about the history of our club, and you know, Souths have sort of been on our doorstep and have taken bits and pieces of that away, and we have this argument a lot about who owns what part of Coogee or whatever it might be. So for us, it's ownership and it's our history. So we like to think we're a prouder club.
Yeah, it's hatred. It's a jealousy. People don't realise they took our juniors from when we were young back in the 60s, the NRL, you know, the rugby league. Now we've got no juniors and it's a hatred.
Geographically, the odds are stacked against them at the Roosters in terms of the juniors that they have. Or they could, even if they started a heap of other teams, they'd still never have the space to have a really strong junior base.
Why the rivalry began, in my opinion, was the defection of Ron Coote at the end of 1971 to Eastern Suburbs.
When Ron signed with the Roosters, it was like a death in the family.
You know what, when I first came to the club, I saw him as a Roosters player, looking at that 75 team as just being a bunch of superstars and something that we wanted to do. And to me, Ron Coote was a Rooster.
Ron Coote was my hero, and I remember when Ron Coote left, I just couldn't bear to watch him play against South, and I nearly gave it away. Like, to watch my hero play especially the Roosters playing against South, that's unthinkable.
Yeah, they sort of target our best player, and when they target the Roosters, they don't miss.
And here's Coote bursting away. He's going to score a try.
As soon as you went to pre-season training, you knew what day you were playing them, and you used to have a bit of a countdown there. We're the battlers, and we drink coffee, they drink latte, and they've always been, they've always been quite wealthy, the club, and they have a tremendous president who looks after them, Nick Politis. That's the way we portray it. We're the battlers, and so we've got to beat them.
They think they're better than us, honestly. Some of my best friends are Roosters fans, but they got this, we're better than you aura about them. And some of them, they call us Souths fans, spelled S-O-U-F-F-S, Souths. They think that we're illiterate. We can't. I mean, I'm not illiterate, mate. I've written 3 books behind the so I'm not a Souths fan, as they say.
I've already said it to the boys. I wouldn't marry a Souths woman. No chance. My kids will not be ingrained in that blood. No way.
Honestly, Souths fans hate us more than we hate them because we're more successful, obviously. Honestly, you don't hate someone that's worse than you. That's just a fact.
And so, off the right foot of Andrew Walker, the Anzac Day match is underway.
Well, I'll never forget the 1996, the Anzac Day massacre in 1996, 62-0 at the Sydney Football Stadium.
Yeah, look, I think once again we were on the up at that stage. I think we were sort of preparing for bigger things, and the poor Rabbits were sort of going through a bit of a tough old time. And I think there's a lot of talk going into the game about the rivalry, but I think once the whistle went, we were in a bit of a different headspace, and we were too good and probably didn't think too much about the Rabbits.
The siren has sounded, it's all over. 62 points to 0.
I took over South halfway through '98 when Steve Martin got sacked, and then I coached him in '99, and mate, we had a fantastic. It's been like 20 years now, and it's been they were a fantastic bunch of blokes, and they give their best every single week.
And there was talk about the clubs not making the cut for the criteria when they were going to shrink the comp, but it was definitely mentioned, and the guys knew about it. Wasn't as many Souths juniors in that particular team. I mean, we had Timmy Brasher and guys from all over the place, Julian O'Neill. They didn't really feel it, but I guess the Roosters had a star-studded lineup, and we were kind of expected to get beaten, so it was less a rivalry and more of a, we really need to beat these guys and save face, but there wasn't the intensity of it as it is today.
Financial instability and poor on-field results came at the worst time for Souths. The NRL was looking for a team to cut, and the bunnies were on the chopping block.
In all honesty, I couldn't fathom it happening. I knew that they were talking about it. I'd actually just signed a 3-year deal a couple of months beforehand to stay at Souths. All around me, guys were leaving the club, going to different clubs to take up a contract. Towards the start of November, I think there was only about 8 of us at training.
In 1998, there was they formed the National Rugby League competition, the NRL, with 20 teams in it, on one proviso that the 20 teams would shrink into 14 teams by the year 2000.
Under enormous adversity. The papers, the Murdoch press were telling us we're not going to be in the comp. The NRL weren't giving too much away, and every game we were getting closer to our last.
So we refused to merge. We finished 15th out of 14. Hence we were kicked out of the competition. Spent 2 years in the courts, 2 street rallies.
For the announcement, I was over at the Channel 9 studios at Chatswood, and I was in the studio and they were going to announce it and they were going to interview me after it. And I can still remember when they said that Souths are out. I was completely shocked because I was really expecting to sit there and hear, talk about the good news that they're going to be in. How could you possibly let go of a club that has so many supporters, so many loyal, passionate supporters, a foundation club that's been so successful? How could you just write them off from some rubbish criteria that I didn't really understand?
I mean, it's one of the closest areas in rugby league left, and we're on each other's doorstep. So I suppose it gave us some breathing space. I mean, this was now our area, and South then moved out, so we probably had a bit of freedom to look at juniors and look at different players and sort of say, well, come to our club because we'll support you and look after you.
Classic example, Braithen Astor. I mean, he left. Braithen never played first grade for South. In the late 90s, he was played in under 20s, like he was only young then. And when we got kicked out, we lost the team. We lost the club. All the players had to go somewhere. But Braithen never came back.
And I've been on both sides of the fence, grew up in this area for South and played for the Roosters.
I went to the Roosters and I met up with Graham Murray and he said, mate, I've never heard anything about you, don't know who you are. Apparently Nick Politis wants you, so we want you. And, which is probably what you don't want to hear.
He was our favourite son, a South Sydney Juniors player.
Wing. Still going. Oh, what a step! What a step! And Craig Wing scored!
I'd never really felt the intense rivalry of Roosters Rabbitohs. I remember a few South fans were like a bit upset, but they understood, and I stayed as long as I possibly could at South.
Craig Wing was one of many South players who were forced to leave the club, but the fight never stopped to get the bunnies back in the comp.
Now we had not only South Sydney supporters, we had rugby league supporters who were there in their St George colours, the Balmain colours, the Canterbury colours, because it was un-Australian what they'd done to us, and it wasn't fair. And the South are the pride of the league.
I was there, I marched on the steps, I saw what those truly loyal, passionate supporters went through and how hard they fought, even the whole time that we were out, all the people that were volunteering. That's, they should always be cherished as the people that brought the club back from the brink of extinction.
A stunning court victory paves the way for South Sydney to make a comeback.
It wasn't until 2002 when they got back in the competition. I'll never forget, the build-up to that was gigantic, and Russell Crowe played a big part in that and was very vocal during that week, to kick off the season. Kind of ripped into the Roosters quite a bit and gave us a bit of a hard time. And then to see Russell Crowe come onto the field on that game, I'll never forget him ringing a bell. He got the bell from the 1908, start of the season, and I was there with Ryan Cross and a few players and looking at Russell Crowe staring at us, ringing a bell, giving us dagger eyes. I thought, that's motivation. Thank you, Russell, for doing that.
I actually had it written into my contract that I was allowed to go back to Souths if I wanted to. But the reality is that Souths never asked. And I think George Piggins came out and said that we'd never pay a player the equivalent of what I was on at the time, so it just never happened.
We knew 2002 we'd fielding virtually a spare parts team, like they're never going to be competitive.
For 10 years, the Roosters had the wood over the bunnies, winning 13 games in a row. Their first 5 years back in the comp, Souths finished in the bottom 4. Souths needed a change if they wanted to keep that rivalry alive, and that change was Russell Crowe. Halfway through the 2007 season, it was announced Wing would return to the Bunnies.
Yeah, so I always look back on that particular press conference, and if there's one thing that I regret doing as a player, I probably regret doing it that way.
He was paraded by Russell Crowe in front of Rabbitohs colours before having to play the rest of the season for the Roosters.
Full credit to Russell and the crew there. They got a lot of mileage out of it, and it was a win over the Roosters. But in hindsight, I think I was I should have been more aware. The older me would probably never have done something like that. I didn't take into consideration how the Roosters fans would feel about it. I remember when I ran out the next day or a couple of days later for the Roosters, we played Parramatta at the footy stadium, and I got booed by the whole crowd, well, all the Roosters fans. I ended up getting man of the match that day to sort of let everyone know, look, I'm always going to put 100% in, and that's how I play my football regardless of where I'm supposed to be going.
I hated seeing him leave, but going to the Rabbits was not great. It was just because, you know, you built that rivalry and all of a sudden they go back to the other side. It was hard to take. You probably played against them a little bit harder when you met him.
Over the next 12 years, a reignited South sparked life back into this rivalry. Who can forget the 2 matches in 2012 where both teams came back from impossible margins?
You can take me now! I have seen it all!
In 2013, the Roosters won the premiership. 2014, South won the premiership. Luke Keary leaves South to go to the Roosters. The rivalry had become between 2 powerhouses of the NRL. In 2018, it went up another level. The 2 teams playing in a preliminary final and the last ever game at Allianz Stadium. Adding some fire to what was already going to be a heated clash, it would be Angus Crichton's last game for South. He was set to join Sydney Roosters on a 3-year deal.
I think I sort of, it might have rattled me at first when I sort of announced that I was leaving, and I was copying a bit of flack when I was still playing for South, but now I think I'm pretty used to it, and I guess going through that sort of thing gives you a bit of thick skin, and I'm pretty used to it now.
Even recently and even in my short career, there's probably been a lot of history, especially last year in that semi-final where we came up short.
That was probably almost as good as the grand final, knowing you knocked them out. If they had won, and oh God, what a grand final that would have been, unfortunately.
Look, I think they've always despised each other. I don't think that's changed regardless of where they are in the ladder, but certainly when they're at the top and they're both jostling it out for a premiership, there's a little bit more of an edge to it. And obviously this year we've got Wayne Bennett as well against Trent Robinson. 2 guys have had a bit of a checkered background. I think they haven't always got along. That's probably going to add a little bit to it too. And we've got the Angus Crichton obviously moving to the Roosters this year, and there'll be some resentment there. So yeah, I think it's always been a bit of hatred there, but maybe the fact they're both in contention and fighting for a premiership, I think it adds a little bit more to it.
The Rabbitohs fan seems to get more competitive with it. Like the Roosters fan hate to lose to the Rabbitohs, but the Rabbitohs fans, I think the Rabbitohs fans love to beat the Roosters more than the Roosters fans hate losing to the Rabbitohs.
Mate, I can't stand them. Like, they're my friends. Today, they're not my friends. They're forever in our shadow. We've got 21 premierships. They're fans. I'm surprised they're even at the game. They're just up themselves. I just can't stand them. You suck. Up South.
Mate, honestly, their supporters just get on our nerves as well. It's just that rivalry, you know, they're just grubs.
I hate them with a passion.
You always have to win those games against the Roosters?
Exactly. You know, I'd rather be a rabbit than a cock.